Welcome, everyone. Today we have a fascinating guest. She is a powerhouse in public service in Washington, D.C. and globally, earning the respect of presidents, kings and queens, Secret Service, their delegations, and the general public. She is kind and wise, and her husband, Judge William Webster, is the only person ever to be the director of the CIA and the FBI. Welcome, Lynda Webster. It is an honor to have you on Little Star Light.
Back at you.
Hi, Lynda. It is so wonderful to see you again.
Oh, likewise. Likewise. Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to speak with all of you.
Thank you for being with us. So here is the first question for you. Being one of the most sought after strategists in Washington, D.C., who has connected her clients at the highest level of business and government, both domestically and abroad, who were your most memorable connections, events that you are able to share with us, and why?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I want to say it's a privilege to be here in Washington. Never dreamed I would have the life I've had. I grew up in a little town in Illinois and wanted to work for CIA. I never dreamed I'd end up marrying the director, but God has a plan for us that we don't always know, right?
Yeah.
So when I married my husband, I gave up a hotel career because hotels never closed and he was still in government. So I launched an event production company. And as time grew and my connections grew, we were privileged to do a lot of very, very special events. And of all the events that I've done, I would say that the events most special to me were the events we've done for the Medal of Honor recipients. The Medal of Honor was given to the men and women. Well, there are a few women who got it, but not many, who have almost given their lives. Some did give their lives, almost made the ultimate sacrifice in war, in battle, to save fellow warriors. And to be able to work with these men and hear their stories and hear their bravery and hear their dedication to country, I would say was the ultimate privilege for me. So I would definitely say that was probably the best experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did dedications of the Air Force Memorial and the Pentagon Memorial. And again, those are very patriotic places. And to be able to open those up to the general public was indeed a privilege.
Oh, that is incredible. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you again for taking the time to spend with us. We greatly appreciate it. You've had the luxury of playing many events for many U.S. presidents. Which U.S. president did you connect the most with and why?
Well, personally, I connected most with George H.W. Bush, my husband's personal hero. I've worked with many presidents professionally, but in terms of having a professional relationship and a personal relationship, I would say certainly we call him Bush 41. The reason he's so special, both to me and to my husband, is we have never known another man or woman of such incredible integrity. The man was dedicated to the bone to service to country and to doing the right thing. And yes, politics was involved, but country was first for him.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for Barbara. And she was the ultimate partner. I learned so much from Barbara Bush. I was 32 when I married my husband. So I had a lot to learn about being a public wife, so to speak, and to be a supportive spouse. In a time when a lot of people were saying you should be your own person, you don't need to be a supportive spouse. Well, I disagreed with that. And I learned from Barbara Bush that she had a very famous saying that got her into trouble at Wellesley one time. She said, I've known a lot of important people over my life, lots, kings, queens, CEOs. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of them ever said, gee, I wish I'd spent more time in the office. And after hearing, and I'm paraphrasing her speech, she probably was far more articulate, but at the end of the day, I then realized that I was in the wrong job for my life at the moment. And that's when I, the next day, left my hotel career and launched something different. And to be able to still be my own self, but launch something that would be better for our marriage. I just don't think that's all old-fashioned. And she did a beautiful job of it. And I think if you read any bio of George H.W. Bush, there's a strong reference to Barbara and the fact that she was a partner through and through.
Hi, Lynda. Karen here.
Yeah,
so now, well, knowing everything you know now, what would be the best advice you would give your younger self?
I would give my younger self the same advice that my parents gave my younger self, and it's just be yourself, be true to yourself. And at the end of every day, you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, did I do the right thing for the right reason? And if you can't answer that in the affirmative, you have to look back on your day and say, what could I have done better? And if I needed to make an apology to somebody or make a correction to a team member, that's what the next day was for. And that was good advice for my parents. And I think it's still good advice even to my older self. I find myself looking in the mirror and saying, how did I do today? And not being too self-critical, but if I was in a hurry, or if I laid on the horn to somebody, or wasn't kind, or didn't think about doing that extra thing that would have made somebody's life more simple, I think about it at the end of every day. It doesn't take long. It's just a habit, but it's a good habit. My parents were very, very strong about reminding me, what have you thought about today, Lynda? So I would say my younger self is still listening to my older self.
Awesome. Thank you.
What advice do you give to people who read the headlines and are scared about what's taking place in society?
Well, this is where I have a little insight of having been a spouse of a CIA director. Bill and I used to play a game. After he would give a speech, the security team would bring in, 5, 6, I don't know how many newspapers there were at the time that would cover the speech. And Bill and I would have fun trying to figure out which paper covered it more closely and did it more accurately. And none of them ever got it right. None of them. They either had an angle, or they didn't get the facts right, or they misspelled my name. No, I'm just kidding. But so I read a newspaper, I glance at the headlines. I don't dig into the facts as much as maybe some people do, because I just don't believe they're all accurate. I want to know what's going on in the world. I don't want to be an ostrich, hiding in the sand, but I would say look at various sources. I try to teach our grandchildren that. I don't know what they're getting at home. So when they're here, I said, well, let's see what Fox says. Let's see what MSNBC is saying today. Let's see what CNN says. Let's see what the New York Times, because in the aggregate, you're going to get an idea of what's going on, and then you can form your own opinions. But the problem we have now, and I think it's the major problem in this country, is people are so focused on what makes them feel good. If you love Fox and want to believe what they say, then you're watching just Fox. And the same goes for MSNBC or CNN. And that's very dangerous for us as a people. And so it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I don't take one person's view or one article's view or one newspaper's view totally.
Wow, these are fascinating answers. Great questions, everyone. This is Andrea again. I'm actually going to read off this piece of paper because it's from a study, and I was really surprised at this, and I wanted to get your take on it. It says, there's a study that found that health risks of prolonged isolation are equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and that social isolation and loneliness have been estimated to shorten a person's lifespan by as many as 15 years. You and Lynda, and I know this because we've known each other for quite some time, long time, your grace and your compassion for people, that's all I've known you as the whole time since I've ever met you. How has your compassion and grace helped individuals from suffering from their experiences in tough times? Because it seems like you have a natural gift of compassion and grace. And so with that statistic, there's a lot of people that are alone and that have isolation and maybe don't realize the effects that can really have. So how would you help in those situations, or how have you already helped?
Well, I'll answer your question in a second, but I'm talking to the Queen of Grace and the Queen of Caring and the Queen of Hearts. So I'm going to answer it, but I'm talking to somebody who's done far more than I ever could in my lifetime to help distressed people, children, parents, family members, friends. So you and the entire team here are to be commended for doing that in spades. So if we are indeed rewarded at the end of our lives for having done good works and been with people, you'll probably live to be about 130. So, what can I say?
That's good.
I'm just trying to get to 70 myself.
Okay.
I think we learned during COVID what happens to us when we're isolated. It was forced isolation. Some people had family galore with them, but most people were far more isolated than they ever wanted to be or thought they wanted to be. I, in my case, love the outdoors, so I was never alone. I had birds and squirrels and trees and things like that make me happy. And that would be my advice to somebody who's isolated from people. Go find a forest, because that gives you energy too. That said, it's still better to hug a person than a tree, I think, for us. And that person needs that hug more than the tree does, probably. So if given a chance, I would hug a person in need before anything else. But sometimes we are isolated or we can't be where we need to be. Fortunately, the internet allows us to send virtual hugs, and through the emojis, they may be silly, but they're also helpful to some people. So I'm not a total fan of the internet for a lot of reasons, but you certainly can communicate well with people. It's really easy to say "I love you" to somebody in Seattle. So that's the good news. And what I try to do, and I tried during COVID, and I didn't do as well as some people, but I tried every day to reach out to a friend. And I've tried to continue that. Just reach out to somebody I haven't talked to for a while and say, "Hey, how are you? I haven't been in touch. How are you?" And it makes me feel good. And it's, as you said, it's probably good for us longevity wise. And it certainly is good health wise, I think, every day, mental health wise, especially, to have connected with another human being that you care about.
Great answer. Great answer. Okay, who's next?
Mine is next. So exciting. This is incredible. Okay, so with such a fulfilling and inspiring career you've had and have, how did you manage to maintain balance between your personal, family life, and professional life?
That's a hard question for a lot of people in Washington to answer, and in your world as well. I mean, we all are balancing multiple things. I can't complain. I had a busy husband, but I didn't have any children. I would toss it back to any of you who have children and a career, and that. Of course, you're taking care of hundreds of children in a lot of ways. So I would say that's probably the hardest. We did have an incredible schedule. I remember one month we had one free night. And it was a very busy time, but if you stay organized, you can manage it. And if you learn to say no, I'm not a person who likes to say no to people, but I learned very quickly that I could not say yes to everybody, and I could say not right now, but maybe later. It's a little softer for somebody like me who doesn't like to say no to people, and I usually meant it. And then I had to learn to say no forever. Like, I'm so sorry, because then all these charities and schools and people would come wanting Bill and me to go speak or whatever, and you can't be everywhere. You can't clone yourself, and you know this from even your own demands on time. So I had to learn pretty quickly to nicely say no. It's not that I don't care. It's because I don't have enough time in the day, and I wouldn't be good at it because my passion is somewhere else. So you just have to learn, I think, to say no. Otherwise, people just keep coming back at you, wanting more and more. And it's important to be honest with people. You can be honest in a nice way, I think, but I learned very quickly. Bill had long learned it. It was I who struggled with it, because so many phones started ringing and everybody wanted a piece of us. And it was hard for me not to do everything that was, and some of the things I said no to were fun, would have been fun. But then the thing I did that was different than other people is once I did say yes, I worked real hard to stick with that yes, and not cancel on people. It's not the Washington way. A lot of people will say yes and then they won't show that night, or they'll cancel the last minute. I never did that. In fact, I remember one time we were invited to go on Air Force One with the president, and I've never been on Air Force One. I really want to go. But I had already agreed to judge something at the flower show with the National Cathedral. And yes, I could have canceled. My husband said, "Well, I'm sure they'll forgive you." But I said, I couldn't forgive myself, because I promised that I would be there, and they're going to scramble. I know it was an event plan. It was like 2 days before. They'd have to really scramble to find somebody else. And so I the first trip on Air Force One, and said goodbye to Bill. I said, bring me some chocolates or something, whatever is in the little box that they have on the plane. I did get to go later, so life was good finally. But I just think you have to, you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, did I do the right thing? And that day I looked in the mirror, I said, I did the right thing, darn it.
That's amazing. So I was so curious about this, and this is super helpful because saying no is so difficult. It causes sometimes a disappointment, and it's hard. And the fact that you said that you will still stick to your word, that's incredible. So many people don't. At the level of profession that you are at, they just feel that, I just don't have to say yes. Even if I said yes, I can change my plans. But it means the world when someone says yes, even if it takes over to be part of such an incredible event, and you still go to a flower show instead of an Air Force One. I mean,
I think they would have forgiven me, but I wouldn't have forgiven myself. Yeah, I think in today's world, again, you were asking about my favorite president. Well, George H.W. Bush and many presidents that we've known had incredible integrity. And if there's any one word that would describe my husband, and he was often called in the news, Mr. Integrity. I mean, it's hard. You'd be hard pressed to find anything negative in the press about my sweet husband. And it's because he, like my father, would look in the mirror every day and said, did I do the right thing? Did I tell the truth? Did I treat people well? And did I care less about myself than other people? And it's rare. And that's one of the things that I think we all need to fight harder for is integrity in our work, in our personal lives, teaching our children, I mean, even in the world in which you serve. I mean, there is integrity in hospitals, a lot of it. I mean, that's but there are also people that cut corners or don't tell the truth or just don't treat people. They're so busy now, God love them. Some of the nurses and doctors are so busy that they don't have time to do maybe the right thing. You see it occasionally. And so I think in all our lives, there are ways to maybe not do things quite as with so much callous and do like you do with heart. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. You all have more heart than any organization I've ever known. So, I think, again, as Daddy said, just look in the mirror. Did you do the right thing today?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So you mentioned that you love the outdoors. What are some of your favorite hobbies, outdoor hobbies and indoor hobbies too?
Well, outdoor hobbies are just breathing outdoors. I mean, just go outdoors. Again, I guess if you're in New York City, maybe it's harder, but out here, I mean, I'm during COVID, my husband and I moved out to what was a weekend place for us. And we've just fallen in love. We live more simply, but I'm looking at a lake and geese and saw a beaver a little bit ago eating my trees. So for me, that's my happy spot. We have a home in Idaho, the Sun Valley area. So I like to go there, and I'm learning again how to ski downhill and cross country and snowshoe. So I love the snow. Ask me that when I'm 95, I don't know, but I saw a 92-year-old cross country skier the other day when I was in Idaho. So I want to be like that. So for me, I just like being outdoors. I was chairman of the board for a few years of American Forests, and that's where I learned just to forest bathe. And in Japan, they actually have a word for forest bathing. It doesn't translate into English. So I get my energy outside. Yeah. And I ride. I have horses, so we ride, and we do a lot of hiking. Even Judge Webster, he's going to be 99 next week, and he could walk a half a mile. And he wants to show off for his children. He'll make it to the mailbox and back, and that's a mile. And I think that's part of why he's going to be 99. And I have no doubt it's the exercise in the outdoors. And again, Andrea, you could teach us all about that and the benefits of good health and good exercise. So just taking a play off of your book.
Yeah, and also something about Judge William, he's pretty amazing on a tennis court. I know he doesn't play tennis now, but he was pretty good running around and playing on a tennis court. But I think also when people feel good about what they do, they feel like they're contributing to the world, to humanity, to service. If they felt like they were living their passion in a sense and making a difference. It seems like that joy of finding something. And he's always had that. Like he would have this sparkle of just, okay, what can I do today? And that was something, no matter who he came across, whether it was official CIA business, FBI business, if it was at an event that was for kids, he had that love of helping others, which is, anyway, I know Rebecca was up next. I didn't mean to step in there, but it was just such a cool experience to know him personally, and both you and Judge William.
We were sweet to say that, but one cute story about him, when we were dating, I went to undergrad school at Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri, and it's 30 miles from his family farm in Missouri, which is near Calwood, Missouri. And he and son Billy invited me to spend the second part of the weekend. I went to a reunion at Stevens, and then I drove over and met with him. And I didn't know what to expect, but it was a pretty rustic farm. It didn't have any heat or air conditioning. And they sent me under the porch to unplug the heater that kept the pipes from freezing. And I immediately realized he was never going to marry Betsy Bloomingdale or Mrs. Rockefeller, because they would never go under the porch and unplug but he took Billy and me to Gasper's truck stop for dinner. And here's the head of the FBI taking me to Gasper's truck stop. And there were two lines. There was a line for the VIPs, and there was a much longer 20, 30-minute line for the regular folks. And I fully expected the agents and Bill to go to the VIP line, but he went to the long line, and we stood in line with all the people who waited 20, 30 minutes to get in for the fried chicken. And I asked him about it later. And I said, I'm just curious. I said, I'm not complaining. I was actually pleased to see you join this line. But if there was ever a VIP in the state of Missouri today, it was you. So why did you go to that line? And he said, Lynda, you've got to understand, I'm not a VIP here. The truckers are the VIPs. They're the ones who are standing and deserve to be standing in that line. I was just like everybody else. And that taught me a great lesson. And you don't find much of that in Washington. But the people who tend to get in trouble are the ones that believe that they should be in the VIP line when they really should be in the other line. And that's why Bill never has gotten in trouble. And in fact, another funny story is, I guess we were married maybe 10 days, and we were taking a trip, and we were on our way back to Washington on the CIA plane. And I was thirsty. So I went to the galley, got a Coke, came back, started to open it. And then I heard the wheels go down. And I thought, not time to drink it. So I stuck it in my purse. We deplaned, we got into the limousine, off we went. About 5 minutes later, I take my Coke out and I start to drink it. And there's this hand that grabs my arm. And I looked at Bill, and these beautiful blue eyes that he has were flaming blue. I've never seen that color before, but they were sizzling. And I said, where'd you get that? Get what? The Coke. What do you think I got? I got it in the galley. Don't you ever, he wagged a finger at me, don't you ever let me see you do that again. I said, do what? Drink a Coke? What did I do wrong? I still hadn't gotten it. What did I do wrong? He said, honey, you've got to understand, we're in the public eye. And that Coke was put on the plane for our use on the plane. But the minute you came off the plane, you should not have brought the Coke. I said, what does it matter? It's just a Coke. He said, there's no gray. It's black or it's white. People get in trouble because they dance in the gray, especially in Washington. Never dance in the gray. He said, that Coke, he said, what could have happened, and never did, but he said, there's so many people around us, somebody might not like you or like me. And you know what's going to happen? They're going to say, did you know Director Webster's wife is taking things off the airplane? They're not going to say she took a Coke off the airplane. They're going to say she's stealing things off the airplane. And yeah, he was so wise. And again, it's a great lesson for all of us. There's black and there's white. And it's a danger zone when you start dancing in the gray. So
wow.
every time I saw a Coke, I thought of him. And I told the story to the general counsel at CIA, Elizabeth Rinskoff, and she just laughed. And she said, I think I would have allowed that one.
And I think so many people are feeling defeated that want to make a difference and help. But do you believe, or can anyone really make a difference anymore in the times we're
Look
in?
at the work you do. You go into a child's room and he or she has lost their hair. They don't feel very good. And you go in and you give them smiles and hugs and teddy bears, or you hug their parents. You think that doesn't make a difference? I mean, that's far more important than anything I can ever think of doing. Just one-on-one combat, so to speak, combat with happiness and combat with caring. And I look at it almost as a personal war. What can we do to make people feel good to the core? It's not a very Washington point of view, but I fortunately have had clients like Save the Children and others, and that have been doing extraordinary work, because there are a lot of people like you out there. They're just not making the headlines. And there are a lot more of us not making the headlines that can make some good happen. And so what if we don't read about it? If all of us who are not necessarily making the headlines at the New York Times went out and made somebody happy every day, a lot of good would happen. And I think people just have to be reminded that it's not all about self. That's what worries me, because I see a lot of, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren are young, but I see them coming up and there's this me. Fortunately, they've been taught to be caring, but they talk about the ads that they hear and the music they're listening to. And a lot of it, well, just look at the ads. It's all about you. And so if we grow up that way, thinking that way, that worries me, because back in my husband's generation, more than my generation, it was during the war year, and my husband was in World War II in Korea, and then he had the Depression. So everybody pitched in and helped. I mean, women were knitting socks back in World War II for soldiers. Everybody participated. Now we don't do that so much.
With Rebecca, as you know, with Rebecca and Corey and Karen, I met them all as children with cancer. And Rebecca, when she became 17, she started helping individuals with mental illness. And so she's been doing it ever since. Rebecca will go into this for a second, but the individuals that are struggling with emotional difficulties or mental challenges, they probably feel isolated or more alone than maybe somebody else. Is that correct, Rebecca? And how, in terms of the service we're talking about, I mean, this is like public service from some of the pioneers in history. Our society will never see probably another Judge William Webster, who's been the director of the CIA and the FBI. He's the only person to ever have that privilege. And you, Lynda, have had just an enormous service area. So even though we're all in it, Adriana has been helping kids as well for a very long time. We still can learn. We're still always learning. And so anyway, so Rebecca, can you just share a little bit about that? So we can all, for the audience members, maybe they know someone struggling that can, get a little insight of what, how a heart can care.
Well, I think it's to go back to one of your comments, Lynda, and I think a lot of people, when they think, oh, I'm going to make a difference, they have to be on the TV or have an article in the New York Times. And then when you answered and you said, it can be on there's people giving back on so many different levels. And I think that was like a good reminder to me, because I thought, well, sure, I'm not on the news but you can make a difference to someone just one-on-one. So I think that's the part. It's a good reminder to remember, just for anyone who's in any kind of a caregiving role, is that you are making a difference every single day. And that helped me that was a good reminder for me. And then also just for anyone who's like, a lot of times when you want to make a difference, you think you have to reach hundreds and thousands of people, but really you don't. You can just reach one.
And you can inspire people to pay it forward. If you're helping somebody else and they say, how can I help? I said, well, just pay it forward. I mean, it's just looking for the little things to do. I mean, there was a lady behind me in the grocery store who looked awful. She was bloodshot eyes. She was skinny. I just paid her groceries. And I said, you know what? I need a Valentine. Could I have that? Or if I see a policeman, I try to buy his latte. Just little tiny things. Does it make a difference? I don't know. I bet it does. And I had one say, what can I do? I said, pay it forward. Buy a latte for somebody else. But those aren't hard things to do, and you never know what it's going to do. But you were asking earlier about lessons from presidents. I learned a wonderful lesson from George H.W. Bush. There's a book written about the fact that the guy wrote notes all the time. And we've got a lot of them. I mean, he just cared a lot, and here's the most important person, most powerful person. I won't say most important, most powerful person in the world. And he took time to take out a pen and paper, and it wasn't ever a long letter. But he just one time, remember when he threw up on the ambassador's lap in Japan? Bill called the secretary and said, I had something very similar happen to me at the French embassy. President Bush wrote him a note thanking him for the phone call because it made him feel good. He said, Bill, that phone call made me feel so good. Thank you. So that made Bill feel good because he got it from George Bush. And so he was this prolific, thank you, make you feel good kind of person. And when Bill lost his first wife, President Bush and Barbara immediately invited him up to Kennebunkport. Come spend a weekend with us, Bill. And when I was diagnosed with cancer years ago, I was at MD Anderson, and the Bushes heard about me being sick. And so they didn't have to, but they took us to lunch. So I watched them at work, and again, they were the top of the world. They didn't have to take me to lunch, but they did. And I was nobody. I was just the wife of a friend of theirs. But they did that all the time. I don't know if you remember, but one time President Bush shaved his head because one of his Secret Service agents had a young son that had leukemia. And of course, the Bushes lost their first daughter to leukemia. So President Bush felt so badly for this agent and this child who was bald that he shaved his own hair off, and then all the agents shaved their there's this wonderful picture, I'm sure you can find it online, but it's President Bush in his wheelchair with a bald head and all these agents with bald heads. That's the kind of, he didn't have to do that.
When you talk about doing something for someone else, at Little Star Foundation, we do long-term care. So it's long-term for as long as, however long they want to be involved with us. In your Webster Group, that the young employees that you've had that have gone on to other careers, they've come back. They came to you before they left and said, with tears in their eyes, and have said, I've learned more here at your company than I did in 4 years of college. So what are you doing that is helping? And then I get this question asked to me a lot. Someone will come up to me and say, how do I find my passion or purpose? And for me, I always felt like I was maybe born with it. So it's always been natural. So if someone asked you that question, how would you answer? How does someone that's a young employer looking to make a difference in the world, how do they find their passion and purpose if they haven't found it yet?
Well, I'm still looking for mine. I didn't wake up to do it. I had other ideas, but God kept giving me new things to do. But sometimes you don't ever wake up every morning saying, this is the passion. I like what I'm doing, but it's not my passion. And, but most people can find something that they really love. And the good news is the young people today are going to live so long. I mean, there are a lot of 90-year-olds now. So the young people can try different things. And I tell them, I said, when they join, I said, look, I have no illusions that you're coming here, and I don't expect you to spend the rest of your life here. If you do, great. But I know you probably won't. And I said, I would encourage you to learn as much as you can about the events business, but also about business in general. And that's what we try to teach, because I, as a young person, left graduate school, and my first couple employers were not really very good. They were screamers and yellers. They weren't they didn't nourish this young person's desire to be a sponge and learn. Instead, they just wanted the job done, and they didn't even take the time to explain how to do it. So I learned about all the things that weren't done right from them, and tried very, very hard not to do that with my young people. And but a lot of it is communication. I said, let's sit down, and you're never going to be good at everything. And if I learned anything in graduate school, it was a professor who said, assess yourself and know what you're good at. Say, I am good and I'm passionate about getting up every morning and doing X, but I'm really lousy at Y, Z, And I did that early on. And I realized I was really lousy at most things that involved business, except a few things that I was really good at. And so I hired a lot of people to do all the things that I can't do well. And that's probably the secret sauce. Just Lynda stays out of their way. Train them, make certain they have training. And the most important thing, and this is the hardest thing with young people, is to teach them to speak up. And I said, look, I'm normal. I don't have antennas. I can't read your mind. And I don't expect you to read. I can't read yours and you can't read mine. So we have to communicate. And you're grown up now. You're out of college. You're for the rest of your life now. You need to communicate if you're lost, if you're not getting trained well enough, if a client is beating up on you. My job is to rescue you from those clients. They shouldn't, most of them aren't that way. But we had one last year who was just horrible to my staff, and they kept quiet. They didn't say anything. We had some new people, and they just thought they had to be stoic. And when I found out that this client was being so horrible, I called in a room. I said, this is my job. My job is to protect you from these people, but I can't read your mind. So we worked it out, and we haven't had a problem with that staff. But it happens with every young person. I tell them to speak up, and then they don't at first because they just don't want to look weak. But I think it's very important in life. And that's one of those life skills we try to teach. It doesn't matter where you're planning events or helping children with cancer. You still have to speak up and say, I'm having a problem. I don't have the solution. And that's why you have a team. I've been going to Mayo Clinic my whole life. And one of the things I most admire about that place is that they, like many institutions I'm sure you work with, have a team approach, because not every doctor has every answer. Not every nurse has every answer. So if you put some great heads together, you're going to come up with a good solution. Mm-hmm. Most cases. And that applies to event planning and just about anything else you can do, except maybe intelligence. You can't really get too many people in a room in intelligence. But
with your and your husband, Judge Webster, career background, what did it feel like for you to be fully immersed in your husband's potentially high risk on so many levels working environment? Would you change anything?
No, it was wonderful. It was a
privilege. Oh, good.
I mean, like I said, I wanted to work for CIA. I was recruited at Thunderbird graduate school and came to Washington expecting to work. I got the security clearance, I got everything, but then I flunked the health exam. So I didn't get in. But 10 years later, I married the director. So
right. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So,
that's so exciting. It must have been something. Yeah,
it still is every time I drive into that place, because the men and women like you are doing some extraordinary work. I mean, they can't talk about it a lot. In fact, Bill used to give awards to them, and he'd stand. They couldn't even take a picture, but they'd stand. He'd give them an award, and then they'd take it back. The CIA wouldn't let them have the award. They have the knowledge that they got the award, but they couldn't have anything physical showing that they got an achievement award. They usually got a nice check for whatever it was they did. So
sure.
Something tangible. Nobody could trace that check. But but they live this life. Talk about selflessness. I mean, the people in intelligence and a lot of our government positions right now. But
so you never felt like it was something, because you're so brave. It never felt to you like you were in danger or
I had a lot of security around me, and
wonderful.
There were some that were a little smarter than others, and I was always hoping that if a terrorist went after us, it would not be X agent that day; it would be Y agent who was sharp. We have a few crazies that went after us, but we were pretty well protected. I mean, you in the street of Washington D.C. So I didn't. You can't wake up thinking that way.
Thank you.
To kind of piggyback that comment she just made. So with light, there also comes dark sometimes. And you and your husband have had some death threats made against you by someone who didn't even know that you and your husband were, in the CIA and FBI, which would be very scary. How do you find the light to keep living in the public spotlight over all these spans of decades?
Well, I guess it goes back down to purpose. I feel like I've been blessed with a position of some sort and a microphone. My husband's at the point where he can't think of doing things on his own. I mean, you've probably seen some op-eds. I can privately say that we've worked on them together, because I'm saying, you've got a voice. You're the only person who's been in these positions and you're a Republican and there's a lot of stuff on the right. And I'm a flaming independent. So I'm not being political, but you can speak out. And I started dialing every press person I knew, Andrea Mitchell, and on down. And that's where you'll see that there's some articles, particularly with NBC, talking about it, about the fact that anybody can be scammed. If they'll scam the former head of the FBI, they'll scam grandma, they'll try to scam grandpa. Wait a minute, you have a former director. Why don't you do a PSA that we can get out to the public? So I worked with the FBI, and they came out and they filmed something here. Bill just saying, look, I was the director of the FBI. I served in the military. I did all this stuff, and I was a victim of a scam. I was almost a victim of a scam. And then we go around asking young people to show this video to grandma and grandpa, show it to their friends next door, show it and do it multiple times, because if they're 90 years old, they're probably not going to remember they saw it 6 weeks ago. But continue to remind them, because these scammers are so smart. That's my latest cause, just because we can use whatever
you can help people.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of things in your life that the public will never know, that hardships or heartache. Some of your friends, some of your friends who passed away are public knowledge. Some others that you're not allowed to share that information because it's confidential. But when you do have a tough day, what's your go-to? Like, do you pray? Do you go eat cake? Do you walk in nature, hug the tree? What is your go-to? And and obviously, Judge William Webster's been that person there. But separate from like a person, what is your, like, before you even knew him, what was that thing that you went to that helped you through a challenge?
I would say all the above, and to different degrees. I have a strong faith. It's not a blind faith. It's a strong faith. I won't profess to be in church every week, but I will profess that I do strongly believe in a higher power, whoever he or she is. So I go there first, and I'm saying, I'm hurting. Help me think through this. Help my heart feel better about the fact that somebody's just done this to me, or I've just lost somebody. And then I go outside. I mean, that's my healing. But I believe that my strength comes from, as I said earlier, just being out in this beautiful world that's been created for us. And that's my passion. I worked very hard trying to preserve that, because when it's gone permanently, and we'll never get it back. We squander.
Talk about the forest.
I mean, one of the most incredible
gratitude
talk I ever went to was, Bill was a member of the Bohemian Grove. It's a men's club and camp in San Francisco, outside of San Francisco. And there was a speaker there who talked about, he was one of these statisticians who literally spent I want to say months figuring out over the course of time how many women had been in the world, how often they ovulated, how often those eggs were fertilized, and how rare it was for any of us to, he basically pointed out that there are as many eggs as there are practically stars that we can see. And most of those eggs, 99.9% of them, were never fertilized. And he pointed out that we are the fertilized eggs. We were the lucky ones who even got here in the first place. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm thinking, my God, I'm so lucky that I made it. So what am I going to do about it? And that's probably the spark that made me realize that every day I had to get up and do something, because I am so privileged that I was fertilized.
That's beautiful. That is wonderful.
Great answer.
Okay, so we're gonna. I know you have company there, and you have a busy life. I hope you give William, Judge William, a hug and gratitude from us for all that he's done. And we hope one day we get to be with you in person, and whether take you out to dinner, take you to a forest, because a lot of forest, and do something for you one day as well. But thank you for sharing your wisdom and your heart. It's daily you do it, and we just want to be part of the reason other people get to know your incredible history, your incredible heart, and you're continuing to give to the world. It's
service to others.
It's like, yeah, it's like your public service has always continued with grace, and same for Judge William. It's incredible, and I just want to thank you for this. You know how I feel about both of you, and so thank you. And I don't have to say shine your light; it's always shining. So
it's going. I'm dodging, trying to get some light here.
Well, thank you so much.
Shining light. My gosh, you all are really doing God's work, and I thank you for it. I'm very blessed that I did not have to have a child that did not have a child that went through what you have personally gone through, but I've seen it. I've grown up around a lot of it, and it sometimes makes, it would often makes a big difference between whether a child will make it or not, as if somebody cares about them. I'm a living example of somebody who had a person. I had adult respiratory syndrome when I was in my 20s, and I was hooked up to all this stuff, almost died. And there was one nurse who I learned later, she was new in the ICU, and she was so flustered by the experience with me, she never went back, but she was there night and day, practically holding my hand, just holding my hand. And here I'm scared. I've got the mask over my face. Nobody was let in. My parents weren't there. And it was the most alone place. And again, you all have in different degrees been in that room alone, and you know what it's like. And so to have that nurse holding my hand when I couldn't breathe and couldn't speak, it gave me the impetus to continue. I think if she hadn't been there, I mean, I can't say because I don't know for sure, but I suspect that if she hadn't been there, and if I had lain in that bed for 10 days alone, I might not be here. Mm-hmm. So after that experience in my 20s, I have this incredible respect for people like you and members of the healthcare profession who go that extra mile to hold the hand. Because I was also surprised at how many don't hold the hand. They're in the room, the doctors and nurses who aren't as caring as she was, and they missed the opportunity to hold that hand. And if I were in the medical profession, I would like to be teaching every one of those men and women, as busy as they are, just to put the hand on the shoulder or squeeze a hand or put a hand on the forehead as you're going out the room. That was, and I'm sure you've experienced it too. It just makes all the difference, that touch. And it happens even in my world, but now my CEO tells me I have to be careful about touching people. I could be sued.
Times have changed.
Well, yeah. Well, if we ever get the privilege of seeing you in person, we will be hugging you and hugging.
I won't. So, but come out to Rappahannock. Come have a reunion. We have a big guest house, and a lake and hikes. It's a great place to have meetings. So just come out and have yourselves a reunion in a forest walk.
We'll be inside getting that. Good. What kind of tea was it? That other, it's Lipton tea, but it was
that label.
We'll have that get ready. Yeah, while you're out. While you're skiing and horseback riding and doing all those things, we'll get all the tea ready and warm for you.
That would be fun. Hold on a second. I want to put my husband on to say hello.